to keep me going with everything I have going on, whether that's football, school, sports, is like two keywords to really define my life and who I am.
Okay.
And that's discipline and consistency, right? Like discipline, doing the things that nobody wants to do and becoming good at those things. And then consistency is the most important, showing up every day and being the same exact person, no matter how you feel, right? Be a proactive person, not a reactive person. So that's kind of the way I live my life, because you can do something for a week, 3 weeks, 4 months, whatever it is. But unless you do something constantly and that becomes like who you are and your habit, that's when that consistency really starts paying off. And that's really allowed me to manage my time and get all these things done.
Ever feel like there just aren't enough hours in the day to start, let alone grow, a side hustle? Well, today's guest shakes up that notion. Meet Walker Ferguson, a full-time college student, Division I football player, and startup founder. And he manages to fit it all in. Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that inspires action and helps you to grow your side hustle into a thriving income stream. I'm your host, Joan Posivy. The main focus of my conversation with Walker was supposed to be about how to take an app from the idea stage through to launch, as he and his partner have done with Ascend. But with so much on his plate, including finding time to be a podcast guest, I had to ask, how does he manage it all? What I didn't anticipate was that this piece on time management would spin off into a standalone episode. Because let's be honest, balancing a side hustle with everything else in life is a struggle that most of us can relate to. Walker lays out a simple, effective strategy that ensures that you're getting the most important things done. He's disciplined, motivated, and inspiring. You'll hear him mention Quadrant 2, which is part of Stephen Covey's time management matrix, a game-changing tool that I taught a version of throughout Canada and the US in a program called Getting It All Done. Be sure to stick around for the end of the episode takeaway, where I'll break down all 4 quadrants and explain how applying them can transform not just your side hustle, but the way you approach your life. In part 2, we will dive into the development and launch of his app. But first, if week after week flies by and you're getting little or zero progress on your side hustle, then this episode is for you. Here's Walker Ferguson. Welcome, Walker.
Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
So often you hear people say, I really do want to start a side hustle, but I just don't have the time. And here you are, college student and all that entails, football player, startup guy. And if that wasn't enough, you carve out time during your school year to do interviews. How do you do that? What's your strategy to seemingly fit it all in?
Yeah, no, I think the most important thing with a side hustle, with starting a business, is understanding like your why, your purpose, like why you do what you do. And that will take you so far, right? That's what gets me out of bed every morning. And what keeps me motivated and allows me to sacrifice, allowed me to do what I do, right? And get at what I need to get done.
What time do you get out of bed?
On average, around 6 a.m.
Really? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes it's a little bit earlier, but on average, I'd say 6. But that being said, you know, a planner is huge for me, right? I really suffered from poor organization earlier on in my career, especially when I got to Wake Forest. Yeah, believe it or not, sometimes I didn't make lifts on time. I would miss a class just because I didn't have my organization in piece. So once I started using an actual planner, I'm a big paper guy too. I'll do it on my Google Calendar as well as like a actual planner, but I write out my days, and on Sunday, I'll actually like prep my week beforehand. So I'll organize like kind of what my meetings are or what I have going on. And in that way, it's very rare if I miss a meeting. If not, I help reschedule if I accidentally overlapped. But that's a big organization piece for me. And then the 2 big things for me to keep me going with everything I have going on, whether that's football, school, sports, is like 2 keywords to really define my life and who I am. Okay. And that's discipline and consistency, right? Like discipline, doing the things that nobody wants to do and becoming good at those things. And then consistency is the most important, showing up every day and being the same exact person, no matter how you feel, right? Be a proactive person, not a reactive person. So that's kind of the way I live my life, because you can do something for a week, 3 weeks, 4 months, whatever it is. But unless you do something constantly and that becomes like who you are and your habit, that's when that consistency really starts paying off. And that's really allowed me to manage my time and get all these things done.
Where do you think you get that from? Because most people weren't born like that. Did you have a mentor along the way, or did something drive that?
Yeah, I've had so many unbelievable mentors throughout my life. I've been very blessed and very fortunate. I would say it really came from playing Division I college football at Wake Forest. There is a standard there with our culture, and things are done a certain way. You show up to things on time. It's how you conduct yourself. And that kind of really got ingrained into me through my coaches. And we always joke, we're like, this is the closest thing to the military, right? So
It sounds like it. Yeah.
yeah, right. Obviously, the military, you can't compare the two, but that's kind of what ingrained that in me, just to have those like two key attributes. And I developed those in college through football.
Wow. And what is it that you're taking in school?
Majoring in economics and minoring in communications.
Oh, okay. And so even though you were turning to your coaches for football, there's really these life skills that you were learning from it that you're now applying to other areas of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. There must have been times when you felt like giving up or were completely overwhelmed. Would that be fair to say?
100%.
How'd you push
No
through?
doubt. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding your why, what your purpose is, like why you're doing what you're doing, and realizing that, life's not always sunshine and rainbows, right? You got to keep going. And when you have that goal in mind, and I think it's really important to begin with the end in mind, right? Whatever that final goal is, whatever you're like that goal you set out to do, because that's like the vision that you keep constantly running back to. And sometimes you might have a setback, right? But you know that a setback is there for a major comeback, because I'm a Christian guy. So I believe God's putting obstacles, trials, tribulations in my life to make me stronger so I can get to where I want to go and really achieve that goal. So that's kind of like how I developed that mindset. And it's really the why.
Let's get back to that planning on Sundays for a moment, because in the beginning, I mentioned all those things that you've got going. There's got to be things that you're saying no to. How do you organize your calendar?
I love it. So I love reading books. I would encourage everybody to read. There's one book I read because I was doing some research and I was like, what are the best like business books for like business owners that like really need to read, right? And
Yeah.
one that kept popping up was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And
I picked that up when you said begin with the end in mind.
yeah, that's awesome. So I actually love that book, and I just really spent some serious time in it. And his application questions were great. And he literally has an entire like sheet within the book to like plan your next week and the day. And I know you read the book, so you know how he talks about quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4 people. And you want to be in that quadrant 2, which is like that's the quadrant where you're planning. It's like important, but not urgent, right? So it's like you need to set up these things that are super important that aren't urgent. So then you're not always in quadrant 1 and you can get everything done you need to do. You manage people, grow. So I really got deep into that book and like really understanding what he was saying, and then really taking the time to stop, right? Apply this, right? So then I would print out this piece of paper, and then it had Monday, Tuesday. He had it all set it out in stone for you. Super easy to follow. And I could just fill it out, right? And that way I could like really plan a quadrant 2 day and start stacking quadrant 2 days, and I could get as much done as I possibly could with how demanding my schedule is. But to answer your question briefly, it was doing a lot of like research and a lot of true like studying through him and through those readings. And then for me, I'm a big like journaler too. So Sunday's kind of like my reset day. So that's the day that I really tap into like my journal. I have a gratitude journal where I write down 2 things I'm grateful for every day. And I really take time to set up my next week. So I write down everything I have meeting wise. I write down like what our growth goals are for the growth team for Ascend. And I write down what my classes, all that good stuff. And then from there, I can manage my schedule and then factor in like the girlfriend, all the other different times, right? So the big time, maximize every hour of the day, right? Because we only get 24.
Number one, clearly this is where that discipline piece comes in that you just described, because there's a million other people out there that read Stephen Covey's book that didn't do anything with it. And you're, to the best of your ability now, living it, especially Sundays when you set aside that time to do the planning. And just for those listeners that aren't familiar with the book, quadrant 2 is that quadrant of planning and preparation, which a lot of people spend very little time in. They're in one of the other quadrants, which is they are always running up against deadlines. So we never see your best work, because you hear some people say, I work best under pressure. But if that's always the case, we're never going to see your best work, because what happens is you get the job done, you get the thing out, and then later on you think, oh God, I could have done this, or I could have added this if I only had a little bit more of the time, or things just drop off.
100%. Hit it on the nail.
So I really applaud you on that. And it makes me want to dig out his book again and reread it for a refresher.
I love it. You should.
And I don't think this is from his book, but my big go-to is definitely planning the night before, certainly the week overview, but then the night before taking a
Yeah.
look at the calendar and prioritizing, okay, what are the top 3 things that I have to do today? Because there are going to be times when, best laid plans, this is what we set out our day to be, but then it blows up, something else goes on that's beyond our control. But at least if our really head down work time is limited that day because of these unintended things that come up, at least if we've got the prioritizing ahead of time, we know instantly, all right, this is my number one for the day that I've got to get done, as opposed to just, oh, what's going to be the easiest or the quickest to do. Would you agree with that?
100%.
So how do you handle unexpected interruptions or things that suddenly just become that priority out of the blue?
I think the most important thing to do for me is to pause for a second, to not give it too much attention right away, right? Because a lot of times you have that choice between choosing between positivity and negativity when something comes up, right? Something that's not planned. And then for me, it's taking that moment to pause, being like, okay, like this is a thought that I had. I acknowledge that thought's there, but I'm not going to give that any attention. And then it's okay, my mind's set, it's fresh. Now I can go on to this activity. And also, that's why it's so important to have a team, right? A team is really everything because you really can't do everything by yourself. And
Okay.
I'm a firm believer it's the who before the what. And when you get the right people and the bus starts rolling, and we have an unbelievable team. I have an unbelievable team, whether that was always sports or even in school. Classmates are unbelievable. So finding ways to synergize and help benefit one another. If I can't personally do something because something comes up, I can call Morgan or Sam or Zay, and then they can step up and fill out what I needed to do later that day, right? So it's finding those people in your life that are loyal, trustworthy, and are just team players that can help you when things come up,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah, we don't do this alone. But it sounds like that was part of your vision, or that's intentional. Like those people just didn't come into your life by happenstance.
That was all God given. So I've been a lot of people in my life that I do believe life's all about relationships.
Yes.
That's my life philosophy for real, other than be curious, not judgmental. And every single phase in my life, whether that was, football, school, with the Sen now, especially with how we've been able to grow and scale at this rate, is because of people that have been coming into our life, people that synergize, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's just, they're all a blessing. I'm just so grateful for them.
Nice. What advice do you have for someone who thinks they just don't have the time to juggle work, personal life, and then add on a side hustle?
I would say start. I would say the best thing you can do is start, right? Like if you're telling yourself that you don't have enough time to do it, then you don't have enough time to do it. But you can
Right.
always make time to do it, right? So I would say, I know people, and it's not really fair for me to say too, because I'm still in college, right? But I'm sure people have a full-time job, families to feed, all of that. It's like on the weekend, right? Instead of watching that TV show for 30 minutes, write a business plan, think of an idea, read a book, do something else that's going to elevate you and get the mind start to think. And then from there, you can really put the action pieces together. You spend 30 minutes a week outside of your job, right? So it's like your job's like your main focus, but this is like an escape. It's like a way to think, brainstorm, find a way to learn and grow and find something you're really passionate about. So I would just say, you're be lying to yourself if you can't make time for it. So I would say if you really want to do a side hustle, you really want to start a company and something you're passionate about, first off, you'll find time to do it. And second off, find something you love and just do it.
Right. Right. And get connected to that why behind it, why you're starting that side
Yes,
hustle.
yes, 100%.
When I was teaching a program called Getting It All Done, I'd often use this demonstration to show how prioritizing the right things makes all the difference. Imagine I'm holding a bucket in front of you. Now let's fill it up. First, I drop in 4 big rocks, and that pretty much fills the bucket. Or so it seems. I can't fit in another big rock. But then I pour in gravel. It finds the gaps between the rocks. Suddenly, there's room for more. Now is the bucket full? Next, I add sand. It fills in even the smaller spaces. Surely the bucket must be full now. But wait! Finally, I pour in water. So each time the bucket appeared full, turns out there was still space after all. Now here's the key question. What if I'd done this in reverse, starting with the water, then the sand first? Would there have been room for the big rocks? Nope. So the bucket equals your calendar. The big rocks are your priorities, the tasks that'll move the needle the most in your side hustle. If you don't put those big rocks in first, your week will fill up with emails, distractions, errands, and other busy work. And before you know it, 7 days have flown by and you've made zero progress on your goals. We are creatures of habit. And if we're not making progress on our goals, there's a habit that needs to change. I love this quote by Robert Heinlein. In the absence of clearly defined goals, we become strangely loyal to performing daily trivia until ultimately we become enslaved by it. For many people, that trivia is mindlessly scrolling, watching TV, or gaming. Walker suggested trading just 30 minutes of TV on the weekend for side hustle time. And at the end of the day, which will feel more rewarding? If you've decided that starting and growing a side hustle is a priority, then it has to be one of the big rocks in your calendar, not a last-minute afterthought. And the good news, you don't need a fancy planner to start this. Just print out a simple week-at-a-glance sheet and start blocking out time for the things that actually matter. In the introduction, I mentioned the time management matrix from Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a great tool to help prioritize your time and understand where your focus will be. Here's my take on it. Imagine a big square divided into 4 smaller squares, like a window pane. Across the top, we label importance. The left side is high importance, the right side is low importance. Down the left side, we label urgency. The top row is high urgency, the bottom row is low urgency. This gives us 4 quadrants. Now let's break them down. Quadrant number 1 are those tasks that are both urgent and important. So that's the top left corner. That's what I call the crisis zone. These are the fires that you have to put out. It could be a literal fire in your home or office. It's urgent, it's important, you need to deal with it right now. But it also includes deadlines, other workplace emergencies, last-minute problems. You can't ignore these, but if you spend all your time here, you'll always feel stressed and reactive. Now, quadrant 2 are those tasks that are not urgent, but important. So it's the bottom left corner. That's known as the growth zone. This is where highly effective people focus. It's the quadrant of planning, goal setting, networking, business strategy, as well as relationship building and personal growth. These things don't scream for attention, but if you make time for them, they prevent crises and set you up for success. Quadrant 3, these are the things that are urgent, but not important. So it's in the top right. I call that the distraction zone. These tasks feel urgent, but don't actually move you forward, like unnecessary meetings or constantly replying to emails. Spending too much time here makes you feel busy, but not productive, and ultimately frustrated. And lastly, quadrant 4, in the bottom right. This is where you're spending time on the things that are not urgent and not important. That's why it's known as the time waster zone. These are pure distractions, mindless scrolling, binge watching, or activities that add little value. Eventually, guilt often creeps in. If you're always in quadrant 1, that's crisis mode, putting out fires, for example, you'll never have time to grow your business or work on big picture goals. If you don't intentionally plan and prioritize, you'll likely get stuck in quadrant 3. That's the one with all the distractions. Handling low-value tasks that feel urgent, but don't truly matter. And if you let yourself drift into quadrant 4, that's the time wasting, too often you'll look back in a few months and wonder why you're in the same place. So the key is quadrant 2, the growth zone. That's prioritizing and planning. That's where you need to be spending more of your time. This means big picture planning, breaking down long-term goals into weekly tasks, and blocking off time in your calendar for high-value work. If you want your side hustle to grow, you have to make a habit of spending more time in quadrant 2. At the end of the day, success in your side hustle isn't about having more time. We all get the same. It's about using your time differently. Honestly, this all comes down to changing your habits. And while simple, it's not easy because habits are automatic. We're doing these things without giving it any conscious thought. You don't think about them, you just do them. Think about your morning routine. You don't wake up every morning and debate whether or not you brush your teeth. It just happens. That's the kind of automatic consistency that you need for your side hustle. So if you truly want to build something amazing, start treating it like one of the big rocks. Make it a priority in your calendar, not just an afterthought. Because if you don't, your time will fill up with those other things. Emails, errands, distractions, and before you know it, another week has passed with no progress. But if you make even small, consistent progress every week, over time, your side hustle will start to really take off. Well, that's a wrap for today. We're back with Walker in our next episode, where we explore how to take an app from idea stage to launch day and beyond. If you'd like to connect with Walker, you can write to him at walkerferguson@ascendmeditations.app. And I'll also drop some links to his socials in the show notes, the full version of which live at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you've benefited in any way at all from any of our episodes, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and add your comment, share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.